All right. The next thing that we're going to do now that we've gone over kind of the theory behind relational tables and normalization and things like that, next thing we want to do is go ahead and do our SQL Server exercise, okay? All right. So, first thing that you're going to want to do is double click on Toad for SQL Server 4.1. Notice you've got lots of little frogs on your desktop now. You've got Toad for Data Analyst, Toad for MySQL, Toad for Oracle. The one that you want to click on next is Toad for SQL Server 4.1. That's what it should say before you double click on it. So you'll double click on that, and you shouldn't have anything set up here. So you'll want to go and create your connection manager. Want to go ahead and do that first. Everything should be good. You're going to connect to the group SQL Server. Server name is em-tal-testing. It should fill in that automatically. Authentication should be Windows Authentication. You'll go ahead and click Connect. It should authenticate you as yourself, so you shouldn't have to type any passwords or anything like that. Okay. And then the first thing that you're going to want to do is click in the editor window to kind of get it registered or get it in focus of the cursor. Okay. And then you're going to want to click, instead of on master, you're going to want to click on LS560. Okay, LS560 is the database that we're going to use for this class. Kind of like Oracle, creating databases in Microsoft SQL Server is kind of an involved process. So I didn't want to create a database for every student. So remember that just as we did in Oracle, we're going to do the same kind of naming conventions in Microsoft SQL Server. We want to make sure to give unique table names. Since we're all sharing the same database, as you're creating your tables and using your tables, want to make sure that you give them a name that corresponds to yourself, to your ID. Okay. For example, when I create tables today, I'm going to call them Clay whatever. So you may want to use your Bama username and use that as your kind of prefix to your table names. Okay. All right. So we clicked this button up here, and what it did was it chose the LS560 database for us. But always you want to make sure in Microsoft SQL Server that you're telling it to use the right database. So that's a simple command, use LS560. Okay? And we're not going to highlight and execute just yet. What I want to do first is I want to create my very first table. So if you think back to the table that we did, to the tables that we were looking at in the theoretical overview, we had a customer table, a part table, an order table, and then a packing list table, which kind of tied everything together. Well, let's go through the process of creating all that stuff, okay? So the first table that we're going to create is the customer table, okay? Now, because we're going to be doing so many commands in this, I went ahead and did a demo for the class, and I've got that demo SQL script saved on another file here. So I'm just copying and pasting between those files. So I created a table called admin cust lookup. But what I'm going to do now is just change the name of that table. I'm going to create table, and it's going to be Clay Cust LU. Okay, so this is basically my way of demarcating or just delineating that this is my table, Clay Cust Lookup table. Okay, got my customer ID. It's an integer. In Microsoft SQL Server, this identity command is how you go in and you tell SQL Server that you want this to auto increment. Okay, so give it the identity command to tell it to auto increment. So see there again, in MySQL it was easy. In Oracle it was incredibly difficult to create an auto increment, and now we're going on to Microsoft SQL Server, and again, it's easy to do that again. All you have to do is insert this identity command right before the end of your line for that field, and you can do it. So again, this first field is the ID. It's the customer ID. It's an integer, a number. I gave it the identity command to tell it to auto increment, and this comma or parentheses 1 comma 1 close parentheses. What that does is that basically tells the SQL Server database that this field in this table is going to start with 1 as the series or the seed. The seed value is 1, okay, so it's starting with 1, and then it's going to increment by 1, okay. You could tell it to increment in any kind of jump that you wanted it to, but what made sense to me was incremented by 1, just so I would have an incrementing climbing numerical sequence, okay? And then the last thing I want to do is I want to tell it that this is my primary key for this table, okay? All right, so that's the first field is customer ID. Second field is customer first name. It's a varchar with a length of 30. Customer last name is a varchar with a length of 30, and then we just close that out. I'm going to quickly go through these commands basically because we've used these over and over and over again, so we don't really want to spend a whole lot of time doing the same thing that we've done before, but just know that there's a little variation on how to get that the auto increment here, okay? Alright, so I'm going to highlight all this, use LS560 create table, blah 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 blah, and I always try to put my semicolon at the end. We're going to click this button right here. Sometimes this button is here, sometimes it's over there. It all depends on if it has room to stick it in there. Sometimes it gets in a weird mood and it wants to put this button in the middle, but sometimes it's way over here. So just letting you know, it should be the play button with the little piece of paper scrolly thing. Okay, so it says executed successfully, so that is great. I'm very glad about that. Just going to take a quick pause for a second. Okay, so we've got the table created. Let's just do a quick select statement. Star from Clay Cust LU. Let's just see what's in there. Should be nothing. Alright, yeah, so we've basically got our ID field, first name, last name field, but there's no data in there. Okay. Let's go ahead and continue on with our creating our tables. So we've created the first table. We've got 3 more tables to create. The next table that I'm going to create is our orders table. Okay, and again, I've already got this typed up. I'm just trying to save some time in this video. I got some comments that the videos were too long last time. So my table name here is Clay Orders _LU. Okay, the first field is the order ID. It's an integer. It increments. That's what that identity command means. 1 comma 1. So we're going to start the series off with 1 and increment 1 on up from there. And it's for primary key. Order LU name is varchar 30. That's the name of the order. The next thing, the next field I've got in there is customer number from customer lookup table, and that's an integer. That's the ID that I'm going to actually pull from the customer lookup table. Okay? Alright, so we've got that going. We're going to go ahead and select all that and then execute that. Alright, that executed successfully. Let's run the select statement just to see what's in there. Should be nothing, but I just want to make sure that the table did create. So select star from Clay Orders LU. Let's execute that. There's nothing in the table, but there's my fields that I created. Now, the one difference between Oracle, another difference between Oracle and MySQL and Microsoft SQL is the fact that I'm not having to put commit statements in. The general gist behind SQL Server and MySQL Server is that they kind of have an auto commit thing, so you don't have to worry about committing and uncommitting and things. That doesn't really pertain to this one, so you don't have to worry about it here. All right, that's kind of I guess you could infer that, but I wanted to explicitly say that as well. Okay, so we've got 2 tables created. We've kind of kept going through these table creations. There's the third table I'm going to create next, and that's the packing list table. All right, so let me pop that in here real quick. And I want to just walk through what I'm doing here. As I paste over my create statements, what I did before was I created these under the admin user, and now I'm creating them under the Clay user, and so I'm giving them a different table name. So Clay packing list, Clay orders, Clay customer lookup, and then yours will be, you know, your Bama ID or your Bama username. So GP Barton or CR Wisner, things like that. So let's highlight this and create that. All right, executed successfully. I'll just go over that statement real quick. The ID for the packing list is incremented. It's an integer, 1, primary key like the others. Then the next 3 are integers as well. We've got a order number ID from the lookup. We've got a part number ID from that lookup, and then quantity needed. So those are all integers, all numbers, okay? Let's do a quick select statement. Select star from Clay packing list. Let's see what's in there. Should be nothing. All right, nothing's in there, but there's my 3 columns, all right, that we'll be using a little bit later on. Okay, so we've created 3 tables. We've created the customer table, the order table, and the packing list table. The last table we're going to make is the parts table, all right? So I'm just going to copy over my parts table, create statement, paste it in, and instead of it being called admin parts, it'll be Clay parts. Create table Clay parts. It's got an integer for the ID, and that auto increments. It's primary key. And the next thing is just the part name. All right, this is going to make more sense when we start inserting the data in there. All right, so I'm just going to highlight my create statement. Go ahead and click execute, and that is done. All right, so we're going to run the select statement just to make sure it's there. All right, it is there. There's no data in it. We're going to solve that pretty quickly here. Okay. Alrighty, so I've got a whole slew of insert statements here. Let me just copy this section here. Okay. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to do is insert into those tables that I made. Let me just go through and fix these real quickly. Insert into the customer table really quickly, okay? I'm just going to go through and fix these really quickly. Alright, so this is the same kind of insert statement we've done before. Alright. So nothing really spectacular there. What I'm doing is I copied this over from another script that had different table names, so I'm going to just rename these back to the table names that I chose. Okay. So the first one is just going to show us what's in there before we start, and there's nothing in there. So then we can go through and we can do our first insert statement, inserting in a customer called Samuel Morse. All right. Actually, no, let's do this one. Johns Hopkins is going to be our first one. Okay. So we highlight it, and it says one row affected. Well, let's run the select statement to see what's in there. Okay. And as we see, customer ID 1, first name's John, last name Hopkins. Okay. So then we've got just this whole slew of insert statements here. All right. We've all done this twice before with the other two labs, the MySQLlab and the Oracle lab. So these insert statements shouldn't be a big deal. We're not going to spend a ton of time on them, but they're basically the same structure. Okay. So we can go ahead and do this. We can insert all these at the same time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So maybe it'll say 6 rows updated. Let's see what happens. Just double checking my syntax. 6 rows affected. All right. And we've got the select statement here. We can highlight it and run it again. And there's our 6 customers. Starts out with John Hopkins and goes all the way to Dolly Madison. Okay? All right. Now we could insert another customer if you wanted to, and I'm going to do this right quick just to show you one issue that came up in the Oracle lab. So let's say that the customer's name had an apostrophe in it. So let's say it was well, we can say Marquise, and the last name is Adagio. Okay, notice how Adagio became black. It basically coded it a different color because it was like, hey, Marquise and D are going to be inserted into the table, but Adagio is like weird stuff. What are you doing here? Well, whenever you have an apostrophe inside of data you're trying to insert into a table, all you have to do is put another tick mark, another apostrophe in. Okay, that extra apostrophe is what we call an escape character. Not like an escape clause where you're trying to get out of something, but an escape character so that it doesn't think you've ended your statement prematurely. Okay, so put an extra tick mark or apostrophe in there, and now the whole line becomes red. All right, let's highlight that. We're going to do an insert statement here. Inserting that in, one row affected, so we didn't get errors. That's good. Now let's do a quick little select statement. Select star from Clay Cust LU, where let's see, Cust F name like percent Marquise. So basically what I'm going to show you is only that row from the table that has the Marquise in it. So we can see that whole row there. Let's see what happens. Oh, did I misspell something? Oh, it's instead of Marquise, I said Macquise. That's why it didn't work. Okay. All right, let's run that. There we go. Okay, so now, as you can see, I was able to insert D Adagio, that funny last name. So Macquise D Adagio, which is a very strange sounding name, but somebody possibly has that name. Anyway, by putting an extra tick or an extra apostrophe in the data encapsulation, you're able to get it to pass into the table. Pretty cool, huh? So that was an issue that came up last week that I wanted to make sure y'all were able to see. Okay, so I've inserted all my customers into the customer table. The next thing that we want to do is insert a part into the parts table. All right. And again, this is an old script, so I'm just changing the table name so that it's applicable. The first part we're putting into the table is the wrench. Okay. So we'll go ahead and execute that. One row affected. Let's do our select statement. Let's see what we've got here. We have one part in there so far, the wrench that we just put in. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and copy and paste the rest of these here. Just going to change the prefix on the table here. Each of these to be clay. Yeah. This shouldn't be too much longer here. Almost done. Got all these parts I'm putting into the parts database, or the parts table, excuse me. And this last select statement here, we'll go ahead and change it so I don't forget. Alright, so scrolling back up here, got all these insert statements here. We got the hammer, crowbar, saw, pipe, ruler, screwdriver, gloves, and hard hat. Let's go ahead and execute all these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Should be 8 rows affected. 8 rows affected. Very good. Let's run the select statement and see what we got in there. Alright, looks good to me. Alright, we're going to keep on moving through this. Alrighty. The first order that I'm being told to make today for our hardware store is for Mr. Morse, Mr. Samuel Morse. He's got the first order, okay? So the first thing I want to do is run a little select statement and figure out what the ID number is for Mr. Morse. And I'm going to put this in here really quickly as a comment, okay? Whenever you want to comment things in Microsoft SQL Server scripting, you can just put a dash dash, okay? So I noticed that he was customer ID number 2, all right? I wanted to get his customer ID number so that I can put it in the table that we're about to do, okay? So Samuel Morse is customer ID number 2. And I just put that in a little notation there in a little commented section. All right. And so now what I want to do is insert into the orders table the customer ID for Samuel Morse and then also the name of that order. Okay. So here's the insert statement that we're going to do here. So insert into clay orders, blah, 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 blah. My first order, comma 2. Now, why am I putting a comma 2 in there? Well, the comma 2 is because that table, if you remember from the PowerPoint, let's go back and look at it really quickly here. Yeah, here we go. The orders table, okay, the reason we're putting a number 2 in here is because it ties back to Samuel Morse. So that order table, it has a unique order lookup ID. Then you've got the order lookup name, which we put in there, my first order, okay? And then we're going to also insert the customer ID from the customer lookup table. So since this order is for Samuel Morse, we're going to put in ID number 2 for Samuel Morse, okay? All right, that's why we're doing what we're doing. Okay, gonna highlight that, click execute. All right, one row affected. Okay, let's do a quick little select statement to see what we've got in that orders table. Okay, my first order, and it's got customer ID number 2, which we know is actually Samuel Moore's. Okay, now the next order that I'm making, I have on my sheet here. The next order that we're doing is actually for the customer Hop Keto. Okay, and so what I want to do is I want to quickly do a search for Mr. Hop Keto and see what his customer ID is. So that's what I'm doing right here. So we run that, we get that he is customer ID 3. So I'm just going to comment that out and put a 3 right there. That way when I get to the insert statement for the orders table, I know that I got to put 3, which is what's put right here, for the customer ID number for Mr. Hop Keto. Okay, we're going to highlight that real quick, run that. And so you kind of get the idea of what we're doing here. Let's do the next one. The next one is for Mr. John Hopkins. Okay. So first what we want to do is we want to see what is the ID number for Mr. Hopkins. Okay, so we're just going to run a quick little search for that. We get back that he is ID number 1, so I'm just going to put that in here as a commented number. And that's how I know on this insert statement I want to put in a number 1. Okay, this is for Mr. Hopkins. He's customer ID number 1, so this is his order name, and this is his order number right here. So I'm going to highlight this. Actually, got to fix my table name, make it applicable here. Oh, and I got to fix this as well to make it work like it's supposed to. I forgot to do that, so let's rerun it. I'll get the same results because it's same tables, just different names. So this one's fixed now, so we're inserting into the Clay orders table ID number 1 for the customer ID, and this is the customer's order name. All right, gonna run that. All right, one row affected. We're gonna keep on trucking. Okay, gonna do this one more time for the last customer. Okay. Okay, so gotta fix my table names. Make sure I do that. Okay, so again, I'm running this little quick query to find out what Mr. Austin's, or excuse me, what Miss Jane Austen's customer ID number is. So I'm going to run that really quickly, and I find out that she is ID 4. All right, I'm just going to put that in there really quickly, just so I remember. And there's her ID number right there, and there's her order name. And I've got the table name right, so we're going to run that really quickly. All right, so all that has been put in there. Let's just do a quick little select statement just to see what's in there. Select star from Clay Clay orders LU. All right, put the semicolon at the end. Don't forget that. Let's see what all is in our orders table. So we've got my first order and the customer ID, a bag of craziness and the customer ID, need this fast and the customer ID, January order and the customer ID for that. Very good. Now we're going to move on to putting data into our other table, the packing list table. That's what's coming up next. All right, so we're back. like I said, the thing we want to do now is insert things into the packing list table, okay? All right, so let me highlight my statement here. All right. So putting things into the packing list table is a little tricky, okay? The first thing that we want to do, okay, is we want to first figure out what the order ID is for the order that's called my first order. Okay, that's the first. In my packing list, I have to figure out what things are supposed to go in the order called my first order. Okay, so I first got to figure out the ID for my first order. The second thing I have to do is I have to figure out what the part number is for a crowbar, because that's what is supposed to go in that first order called my first order. Okay, so let's go through real quick. We're going to change our table names so that they match with what I did up there. All right. And again, I'm just pasting these in from a script I've already done, so that I'm not typing these by hand each time, and taking up so much time, and you're just sitting there pulling your hair out and gritting your teeth trying to get this over with. Okay, so the first thing, like I said, what it's going to do is it's going to tell us the ID number that corresponds to the order called my first order. Okay, that's what happens when you put in that where clause and you give it a field name like, and you put in your wildcards wrapped around your order name. Okay, so that's what we're doing, searching that table to find the order number. So we'll search real quick, and we find out that is order ID number 1. So I put a little comment in 1 right there. That's why I did that. Next thing I'll do is I'll search the parts table to find out what part number I have for crowbar. Okay, so we're going to execute that. We find out that that is ID number 3. Okay, now that we have those numbers, we can do our insert statement. Okay, so we're going to insert into the packing list table all those fields, and here's the values that we're going to insert. Why are we inserting 1? We're inserting 1 because that's the order ID. Okay, so that's the first one that goes in there. We're going to insert 3. Why are we inserting a 3? We're inserting a 3 because that is the part number that goes with crowbar. We're supposed to be inserting a crowbar into this order. Okay? All right. Now, what about the 8? Why are we inserting 8? Well, as you'll look here, 8 is quantity needed. Okay? So the reason we're inserting 8 is because the packing list sheet that I have, or the request from the customer that I got, says that they need 8 crowbars. Okay? All right, so we're going to highlight this and run that. All right, 1 row affected. Let's see what got put in there. Okay? So we're going to run this quick select statement. All right, what we have is a table full of numbers. There is absolutely no text at all in this table. Is that helpful? Well, it may not be helpful when you're looking at the table. You may say, gosh, I don't know what this is all about. But if you take a second and you go back to the relationship diagram, let's do that really quickly. So here it is, the first row we've got. It's 1, 1, 3, 8. All right. Well, this 1 is a unique identifier for the packing list row. Okay, so every row that's in our packing list table has a unique identifier associated with it. All right. The next thing is the order number from the order table. All right. Well, there's the order number. That's where that comes from. Well, what about part number? Well, that corresponds to the crowbar. All right. It's part number 3. So order number 1, part number 3, and we need 8 of them. All right? It's that simple, right? It is that simple. Okay, back to our packing list here. All right. So I've got quite a lot of things here. I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of these. copy is a huge assortment of them here that I'm going to paste in here. Just a ton and a half of these. But we're doing the same thing over and over and over again, okay? Just going to walk through them. I'm going to walk through one more slowly, talking about it, and then I'm just going to zip through the other ones and get them in there so that we can move on. Okay, so here's one more that we're going to go through together, all right? So we select the packing list. I think we've already done that, but we can do it one more time. Won't hurt anything. All right, so that's what we've got in there so far. The order that I'm still working on is that first order, okay? All right, so that's why there's a 1 right there, because we know that it's order ID number 1. All right, so what I've got to find to go in order ID number 1 is the saw. What's the order ID for the saw? So if I run this select statement to find that order, to find the part number for the saw, excuse me, what I got to find is the part number for the saw. All right, so we're going to run this select statement to find the part number for the saw. The part number for the saw is part number 4. All right, so I put a little 4 there so I remember that that's the part number for the saw. So we're going to insert into the table order ID number 1, part number 4, and we need 9 of them. So that's why it's 1, 4, 9. Okay? I'm going to highlight that, execute that, and we are good to go. All right? Let's run a quick select statement and see what we got just to make sure. All right, so we've got 2 rows now. This is order number 1. We're pulling in part number 3, and we need 8 of them. Okay, order number 1 again. We're going to pull in part number 4, and we need 9 of those. Okay, so here we go. Real quickly, I'm going to quit describing each thing, but I'm just going to go through and edit this really quickly and run these statements. Okay. Part number 5, we're going to insert that. Run a quick select statement, see what we got in the table so far. All right, still on order number 1. We just basically said we needed 3 of part number 5. Okay. Okay, we're going to keep on trucking here. Okay. What is the part number for the ruler? It's part number 6. Going to put that into the table. We need 5 of those. That's why there's a 5 there. All right. What do we have in our packing list so far? All this has been for order number 1. The most recent thing we added was part number 6. We needed 5 of those. Okay. Let's keep on going. Now you'll notice this time that we're not only searching to find the order number, because it's a new order we're doing here, we're also searching to find the part number. Okay? And remember, that's because this is a different order. We're through with order number 1, and now we're going to go for the order that I have that's called Need This Fast. Well, what's the order number for that? So we're going to do a quick search, find that out. That is order number 3. Okay? So now that we know that it's order number 3, we're going to put the 3 in there. And then we're going to go here and find out what is that part number for the gloves. Part number for the gloves is part number 8. And now we're going to insert order 3, part number 8, and we need 3 of them. That's why it's 383. All right, let's see what we got in our table so far. All right, see, we started order number 3 right there. We're just going to keep on going. And again, you can fast forward through this part if this is boring to you. But this is just hitting home the same thing over and over and over again. These relationships, finding information, how you find the information, how you use the information. Searching for that part number for the ruler. It's part number 6. So we're going to insert that into the table. What is the part number for the crowbar? It's part number 3. So we're going to insert that into the packing list table. All right, what do we have in our packing list table so far? We've got stuff for order number 1 and order number 3. Well, there's more orders here. Let's keep on going. Our next order is called a bag of craziness. All right, so we got to figure out what's the order number ID for a bag of craziness, right? What is the order number ID for a bag of craziness? And so how do we do that? Well, to figure that out, we just run the select statement, which says what is the order number where the order LU name is like a bag of craziness. That's order number 2. All right. Well, what's the part number for the hammer again? What is that part number? It's part number 2. So then we run this insert statement. Got that going. Let's see what we got in the table. So we've got stuff for order number 1, order number 3, and now order number 2. Okay. Well, what's the part number for the screwdriver again? So we're running that. That's part number 7. So let's insert that into this order as well. All right, we just did that. And now we'll, whoops, make sure the table name matches. All right, select star from clay packing list. Okay. So we've got stuff in there for order numbers 1, 3, and 2. All right. Now, well, that's nice. That's a big table of stuff there. As we go back to this, is a big table of stuff. We got order numbers 1, 3, and 2. But how does that help us at all? Well, the reason that it helps us is because we can now run our join statements. All right. This join statement's pretty big here. I'm going to copy it over and paste it in. All right. So the first thing I got to do is go through and put my correct table names in. That's going to take a minute or two. But while I'm doing this, just think about how everything relates together, how we normalized our tables, and we made lookup tables for part numbers and customers and orders. Okay. Think about that packing list table, how it's just a bunch of numbers. Well, those numbers do mean things, though. So you got to always remember that the numbers do mean things. They help us relate things together. They help give us normalization, the uniqueness, right? That way we don't have to duplicate information over and over and over again and risk, human error of accidentally typing in the wrong name in a certain situation. Lots of good reasons why we normalize and make relational databases. Trying to make sure I get all these things named the right thing. Okay. Good deal. Well, let's go over this really quickly, okay? This join select statement here. All right, let me get that other stuff out of the way. So we're just looking at that. Okay. So this is a little fancier select statement than what we've done in the past. What we're doing here is we're selecting the specific column. So we're selecting first name from the customer lookup table, last name from the customer lookup table, the order name from the order lookup table, and the part name from the part lookup table, and then the quantity needed from the packing list. Okay? And we're using the as command to say this field is going to show up as this name. Now notice I put a double tick right here, okay? Customer's first name. Because I want it to actually say customers as in, the ownership, the apostrophe, okay? Notice I had to put in the escape apostrophe so that it would take the actual apostrophe I wanted it to take, right? This is kind of a review from what we did earlier. So just reminding you again, that's the escape apostrophe so that you can put in an apostrophe in your data, okay, or in your view. So we got customer's first name, customer's last name, order name, part, and quantity needed. These are, when we do the as command, we're allowing us to rename the column headers for our table, our pretty report view that we're going to have here, okay? So that's all that does. So instead of saying select star, I'm actually specifying the specific field names. Whenever you do that, you have to put a comma between them. And since I'm renaming the column headers, I'm doing the as command. Okay, that's all that's going on right there. The next thing is pretty simple. We say from clay packing list. All right, that's that main table that you see down here in the results pane. From clay packing list, and then I'm joining the parts lookup table, the orders lookup table, and the customer lookup table on those IDs that match, okay? And notice that I'm putting table name dot field name. That's the syntax you have to use when you're doing it in your version in the lab so that everything ties together, okay? Table name dot field name, 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 table name dot field name. And so basically all these, on this equals that, okay? That goes back to all these relationships right here. That's how we're relating these things together. 2 to 2, 1 to 1, 3 to 3. That's how, when you have similar items, that's how you can relate all those things together. Okay? All right, so that is that statement. We're going to highlight it and run it. Let's see what we get. Okay, if it runs right, if it runs well, this is what you'll get down here. Okay, and look how beautiful that is. That is just absolutely gorgeous. That is joining all that information together. We're renaming the column headers so they're pretty descriptive names. And then we've got all the information for the hardware store so that they can begin to fulfill their orders. All right, let me shrink this down, the results set down, so you can see that. I'm just going to pause for just a second so you can actually pause this in YouTube and look at this and work that out. Okay, so this is the end of the lab, okay? Once you've gotten to this point and you've created all your tables, you've inserted all your data, and then you've joined it together, that completes the lab. You're done. So then just go over here to File and Save File. All right, you can save it as Microsoft SQL Server Lab. Save it as a SQL file in your documents on the server. Hit enter, And then just email me that you're done, that you've done it, okay? I want to exit out of that. And then, of course, log off. And email me, okay?